Hi there, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Jenny and today we're going to be going through all the books that I read in March. I'm going to be honest, we started off the month strong and by the end of it, it kind of dove off a cliff. Despite that, there's still quite a few books that I did manage to get through, so it didn't go too bad. The first two books that I read this month were actually two short stories because I wanted to start the month off strong and I'm really glad I did considering how the month ended. The first book that I read was The Six Deaths of the Saint by Alix E. Harrow. This short story had been popping up all over my For You page, all over my Goodreads. Everybody that I was following was talking about it. All the videos that I was watching, everybody seemed to be talking about this new short story. So of course, considering how short it is, I just had to join in and see what everyone was talking about. And I've got to say, short stories for me are a bit of a hit and miss because I like novels where you can really get to know characters, and short stories, obviously, you don't really find out like in depth too much about the characters and go on a journey with them because it's so fast paced, you're trying to get through the plot. However, The Six Deaths of the Saint was phenomenal. I rated it 5 stars because it was one of the first short stories that I've actually shed a tear to. Like, that's how much it got me. And despite the fact that the plot was moving quite fast, the story was so gripping and you really did get to know the main character. Essentially, the plot of the story is that the Saint of War saves the life of a servant girl so that she can go on to fulfill her destiny as the kingdom's greatest warrior, and she ends up working right underneath the king himself, but the way the king treats her is clearly not very good. And I don't want to see too much more because it is very short, so I could end up ruining the whole plot, but it is an absolute must read for anybody looking to hit some reading goals really quickly. I honestly highly recommend this one. The second book I read was Zecora, which is also another short story. The story begins with a woman giving birth in hospital, and she ends up going through sort of all aspects of her life, which all come back to this fundamental moment that she is about to be a mother. From the father who abandoned her for another wife and child, to her overly opinionated mother, to the father of her child who abandoned her right after he found out that she was pregnant. There is so much to this short story, and I think it's only like 30 pages long, but this was another one that just gripped me straight from the beginning, and it's honestly so heartbreaking to read, but so wonderfully written, so poignant, and it is an absolute must read. This was another short story that I rated 5 stars. The third book that I read was The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, and I rated this one 3 stars. The story follows a year in Joan Didion's life where she lost both her husband and her daughter. And 5 days before her husband died, her daughter had been taken into hospital. So not only was she already dealing with that and all the worry there, then she actually lost her husband and her daughter, who she wasn't able to speak to about any of this for a very long time. There was nothing inherently wrong with this novel, but the reason that I rated it 3 stars is because I felt like, even though it is a short book, it went on for way too long, and there was so many moments in there that were too mundane and didn't really have a point or go anywhere or make a message. And I understand this is kind of like a fragmented story of all of Joan Didion's thoughts and feelings over the course of the year of losing her husband and her daughter. But at the same time, it didn't make for great storytelling. A lot of these mundane points that we come to felt less like a commentary on grief and just more about things that was happening in her life that just did not relate to the idea of the novel concept, which was grief. A lot of it just felt oddly unrelated to the point that this story was trying to make. Whereas when we did get to the commentary on grief itself, that was really good and I found it really thought-provoking, and that's why I've rated this book 3 stars, because I can see the idea, those moments were the point of this novel, but I felt like all that other stuff could have just been cut out. It could have been a lot short of a novel and it really would have worked, and it probably would have been 5 stars for me. The next book that I read was actually an ARC read from NetGalley called Atlanta by Jennifer Saint. This story is a Greek retelling following the human huntress Atalanta, who spent most of her life living among the nymphs and the goddess Artemis. The only rule to this existence is to never lie with a man. So most of Atlanta's life has been very peaceful, living amongst women. However, Artemis then sends Atlanta on a quest to join the Argonauts and recover the Golden Fleece. Of course, immediately we know that is going to cause problems because she is going to be the only woman amongst a party of men and she has never been around them before. So she doesn't know what to expect, and she's been told horror stories by Artemis about what men are like. At first, I was kind of wondering what is going to separate this from other Greek retellings, but it honestly really surprised me. I honestly could not put this book down. The more you kept reading, the more that kept happening, the more the plot just exploded, down to the very last page where you think that nothing more could possibly happen, and then it does. This is a 5-star book and it's actually due to come out this month in April. So if you are watching this and you love a novel like The Song of Achilles, absolutely 100% pick up Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. You're gonna love it. The next book that I read was Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark, and I rated this book 2 stars. This is actually the first ever mafia romance book that I have ever read. Quite surprisingly, because I'm an avid romance reader. So I'm kind of shocked that it's actually taken me this long to actually read a mafia romance book. But everybody has been talking about this kind of subgenre, and I think out of all of the books, this is the one that I've heard rated highly the most. And I'm really disappointed to say that I hated this book. It definitely read like a piece of fan fiction. Not that fan fiction is terrible, because there are some really great pieces of writing on fan fiction. I think the majority of them, you can tell, are written by teenagers, which is great for them trying to hone their craft. But it becomes a bit of a problem when it is fully grown adult authors that are writing like this and getting their books published. Kind of just dilutes the book well. This book essentially follows 2 families, the Griffins and the Gallows, both whom are mafia families, though I did not get mafia from this book in the slightest. Like, I don't know what I was expecting really, but it just did not seem mafia-ness to me. Also, the 2 main characters in this love story are Ada and Callum, and before the beginning of the novel, they have never met. They just know that their families have been sort of at each other's throats for like decades or centuries or however long it's been, but that is never explained. We're never told why these families hate each other. So immediately I don't believe it, and the fact that these 2 characters have never met, and then literally they both try and kill each other at certain points. Like within the first 100-ish pages, they are actively like trying to unalive each other, and I couldn't believe it because I was like, I don't believe this. Now, I'm all for strong female characters. I love seeing that in a book. But Ada had absolutely no point to this novel. Despite the fact that she's the main character and it's the romance, she had no goals and aspirations. She's just kind of there in every, amongst the families, in Callum's story, and that's it. She had no personality, she had nothing to her, and she came across very whiny. The writing did start to get better as we went along in the story, but it was not enough to save this book for me, and honestly, I hated it. I couldn't wait to finish it, put it down, and never touch it again, except to make this video. The next book I read was another ARC read from NetGalley called Death of a Bookseller by Alice Slater, and I rated this one 5 stars. The story follows 2 women who work in a bookshop who both have completely distinctive, different personalities. One who is called Roach. The first woman, Roach, is a lover of true crime. She cannot get enough of reading book after book of true crime stories. Whereas Laura, the other woman, her life has come way too close to a true crime story. So immediately you can see that Roach is going to be so unbelievably interested in Laura's story, whereas Laura does not want to talk about it at all. She does not want to reveal her past. It's a dual female point of view novel, which is something I don't see very often, so already I was really interested in this book because it was showing me something different, something that I'm not used to seeing, and I couldn't wait to get started. This is a great example of how obsession can turn from a silent introspection to full-blown delusion, and that is exactly what happens, and you see it from the moment that these 2 characters meet right through to the bitter end. And I devoured this book. It was really interesting because when you think about it, you feel like you should be on one character's side versus the other, and from a brief review of hearing me speaking about this, you'll probably think you'll know who side you're going to be on, but when you read the novel, you get thrusted from one character's point of view to the other, and you cannot decide who you agree with. When things start to take the darkest of turns, then it starts to become a lot clearer, but from the events that happened, it's really not easy to decide whose side you should be on because both characters are inherently dislikable, and I think that's the beauty of this novel. This book also comes out in April of this year, so absolutely make sure that you pick up a copy because you don't want to miss it. The next book I read was Sinners Anonymous by Som Sketcher, and I rated this book 4 stars. Now, after the absolutely awful time I had reading Brutal Prince, I knew I needed to read something that would hopefully redeem mafia romance for me. And another book that I'd seen talked about a lot was Sinners Anonymous. So I decided to give this one a go. It was actually also a recommendation by a family member. So I trusted their point of view and decided to just jump straight into it. Almost immediately, I saw a complete difference in this book than Brutal Prince. Both of the main characters actually had personality. They actually both had goals and aspirations, which is vital to any romance novel for me. They have to have something more about them than just this love story. The novel essentially follows a woman who is about to marry a mafia boss who is in his 70s. At the time of the novel, she's 21, and when the her fiance's nephew comes to town. Immediately sparks fly. I was just gripped at this novel from the start. There were things that were cheesy, that I didn't like, that I could have done without. But overall, compared to the first mafia romance book I read, this was like a complete 180 for me, and I just devoured this book. So highly recommend Sinners Anonymous if you want to take your first steps into this mafia romance subgenre. This is a great start. The next book I read was Throttled by Lauren Asher, and I rated this one 5 stars. Lauren Asher has really grown on me. The first book of hers I ever read was The Fine Print, which if you've watched some of my other videos, you'll know I did not like. But all of her other books that I've read, which were the other 2 books in that series and now Throttled, I'm beginning to wonder what I was thinking. Maybe I should go back and read The Fine Print and decide if I was just in a bad mood that day, because the way she writes is so gripping and captivating, and I love the way that she writes characters, and everything just lines up for me about all her books, and particularly Throttled. So maybe I need to go back and read The Fine Print again, because I might change my mind on that rating. But for me, Throttled was brilliant. It was such a devouring read, a great, you know, captivation and plot, story, characters, everything fell into line for me. And I am now so invested in F1 romances, and I cannot wait to devour the other 3 books in this series, which I have actually already ordered, so cannot wait. The story follows Maya, who is following her brother, who has just become an F1 racer, a professional F1 racer, sort of around the world, around different countries, competing in different races. And part of her brother's team is Noah Slade, who is already a champion, already well known across the world. And of course they have a connection and they start to fall in love, which causes problems because it is her brother's teammate and technically rival as well. So there's a lot of tension there. There's a lot of secrets and hiding, and it all just worked. And the last book I read was Normal People by Sally Rooney, and I rated this one 1 star. It has been many, many years since I have rated a book 1 star, because generally, even if I don't like a book, I can see why it appeals to other people and why they might like it. So I generally always give those kind of books 2 stars, because even if I didn't like it, I can see the appeal. With this book, I do not understand what people see in this book. I really don't. The book follows Connell and Marianne, who both grew up together in Ireland, and they meet because Connell's mother works for Marianne's mother as, I think it's a cleaner, and he comes to meet his mother after work one day, and Connell and Marianne begin talking. Now, their first conversation is supposed to be this defining moment of their connection and their relationship together. I did not get any of that. I did not see a connection. I felt no spark. It was absolutely, completely mundane to me. So already we were off to a bad start with this book. Then fast forward, we go through quite a few months and years throughout this book, and it keeps skipping ahead through chapters. For me, most of this book was entirely mundane. There was absolutely nothing interesting about it at all. And I've heard about people talking about like the themes of depression, anxiety and abuse. For me, all of that stuff came way too late in this book. And while when we did focus on those things, those parts were really interesting, we almost immediately go away from it again, and we get some mundane moments in each of these characters' lives that quite frankly means absolutely nothing to me. And I just wanted to go back to these defining moments of their lives and get more into the characters' depression, their anxiety, get more into the abuse that they've suffered, and we just got none of that. I also felt like there's different points in this novel where both Marianne and Connell have this moment in their own sort of heads where they say how much they wish they were together. But the reason that these characters aren't together is because of each other. They literally don't speak. They never say anything to each other of any substance or worth. So considering that, I already feel like there's no reason that they should be in love with each other and have this connection because they never fucking speak. But also is they are in the situation because of themselves. You know, they are very capable of dating other people or getting into relationships with other people, but then they complain that they're not in relationships with each other. And I'm like, well, if you're capable of doing that with other people, then you should be with each other. And this whole novel could have been absolutely solved by like page 3. So yeah, I really did not have a good time reading this book. And when I said at the beginning of this video where my reading kind of went off a cliff by the end of the month, I started this book on the 23rd of March and I only just managed to scrape finishing it by the 31st of March because I absolutely despised picking this up and opening it. But considering I've paid money to have this physical copy, it just felt like I have to finish it. I'm not generally the person that can ever DNF a book, even if I hate it. And I also wanted to make sure that there wasn't like a complete 180 by the time that we got to the end of this novel, and it actually turned out to be good, which it did not. Overall, I was just really disappointed, and it really puts me off reading other Sally Rooney books, to be honest, which I actually do have physical copies of as well, because I trusted BookTok so much when people were recommending this to me that I bought like pretty much all of the novels that she's ever released, and now I'm really regretting it because I'm afraid they're all going to be as bad as this one. I think I might have to come back to Sally Rooney maybe next year by the time that I've gotten over this horrific rendition. I do want to put a disclaimer here as well. If you are somebody watching this who really loved Normal People, that is absolutely fine. I am not saying that you should not like it. I am just giving my opinion of saying why I didn't like it, why I personally can't see why this is so popular. But if you found this to be really beneficial and helping in mental health, then fantastic. I'm so glad that you enjoyed this. I really wish that I did, but unfortunately I just didn't. And they are all the books that I read in March. So thank you so much for watching this video right to the end. I cannot thank you enough. Please leave me a like, comment down below your thoughts on any of these novels that I've talked about today. I'd love to hear what you think, and make sure that you subscribe to my channel for more book related content in the future. Bye!